I had $10,000, a heart full of grief, and a hospital bill stamped in red ink, denied to the world. I was a nobody. To Alistair Kang, I was just a decimal point he deleted to save his bonus. But tonight, he's on his knees, and I'm the one holding the gavel. I offered the city's most dangerous mafia boss every cent I owned to buy a miracle. He refused my money, but he accepted a much darker price. 90 days of my life. A contract marriage written in blood. He promised to burn the world down for me, but I didn't realize. He'd been watching me long before I ever walked into his den. The rain and soul doesn't wash away your sins. It just makes the blood slicker. I stood in Cassian, the Coldo's penthouse, dripping on a rug that cost more than my mother's life was worth. I was there to buy a ghost. I wanted the man who pulls the strings of the underworld to pull the floor out from under Alistair Kang.
$10,000 to ruin a billionaire. You're either the bravest woman in Seoul, Maya Seoul, or the most desperate.
He didn't look at the money. He looked at me with a hunger that made the freezing rain feel like fire. He didn't want my cash. He wanted a dragon bride. A queen to sit by his side for 90 days while he systematically erased my enemies from existence. I knew signing that contract was like walking into a golden cage. I knew Cassian was a monster, but Alistair Kang killed the only thing I loved. So I decided to become a monster's favorite obsession. Day 1 of 90 has officially begun. And Alistair. He has no idea what's coming. The O estate felt more like a fortress than a home. As the heavy iron gates clicked shut behind the black limousine, Maya felt the weight of her choice. She looked at her reflection in the tinted window. Her long dark hair was still damp from the rain, and her old brown trench coat looked out of place against the soft leather seats. Across from her sat Cassian. Oh, in the dim light, his black hair and sharp suit made him look like a statue. He didn't say a word, but his cold gaze never left her. When they stepped out, the air was quiet. A row of men in dark suits stood at the entrance. They didn't bow to her. They bowed to Cassian. Maya clutched her small envelope of cash, feeling small. A woman with gray hair and a face like stone stepped forward. This was the head of the staff, and her eyes scanned Maya like she was a problem to be solved. Maya realized then that these people weren't just servants. They were lethal. They watched her every move, making her feel like a bird in a very expensive cage. Cassian led her through hallways filled with gold and quiet shadows. He stopped at a tall set of doors. "This is your room," he said, his voice deep and smooth. "My staff will bring you what you need. From now on, you do not leave this estate without me." Maya looked at him, her heart beating fast. "I'm a guest here, right?" she asked. Cassian leaned in closer, the smell of expensive wood and cold air following him. He didn't smile. "You are more than a guest, Maya. You are my prize, and I do not let my prizes get lost." Inside the room, everything was perfect. There were silk sheets and flowers that smelled like spring. But as Maya looked around, she noticed the cameras in the corners and the locks on the windows. She was safe from Alistair Kang, but she was now in the hands of a man who treated people like chess pieces. She sat on the edge of the bed, the denied hospital bill still in her pocket. She had traded her freedom for a chance at revenge. As she heard the soft click of the door locking from the outside, she knew the 90 days would be the longest of her life. She was no longer just a girl from the streets. She was the property of the dragon. The next morning, the sun had not yet risen when the heavy doors to Maya's room swung open. Cassian stepped inside with a face as hard as stone. He didn't knock or ask for permission. Behind him, 2 silent guards carried a metal bin and the clothes Maya had worn when she first arrived. They held her old, wet trench coat and her worn-out shoes like they were trash. "These belong to a girl who was a victim. That girl is dead now," Cassian said, his voice echoing in the large room. He dropped the coat into the bin, and a guard lit a match. Maya watched from the bed as the only thing she owned turned into gray ash and smoke. It felt like her old life was disappearing forever. From now on, you wear only what I give you. You will dress like the queen of this house." He reached into his silk suit pocket and pulled out a velvet box. Inside was a ring with a large black diamond carved into the shape of a dragon. The eyes of the dragon were small, red rubies that seemed to glow. He took her hand and slid the ring onto her finger. It felt cold and heavy, a weight that reminded her of the deal they made. "This ring tells the world you are mine," he whispered, his eyes locking onto hers. "Anyone who touches this ring or you dies. You are now untouchable, Maya." The night of the grand gala arrived, and Maya did not recognize the woman in the mirror. She wore a long black silk dress that flowed like liquid. Gold dragons were stitched into the fabric, crawling up the sides of her body. Her dark hair was styled in soft, elegant waves, and her makeup was bold. For the first time in her life, she didn't look like a girl who had been pushed around. She looked dangerous when she walked into the golden ballroom on Cassian's arm. The music stopped. Hundreds of people turned to look, their mouths hanging open. In the center of the room, Alistair Kang stood with a glass of champagne, looking proud and powerful. But when his eyes met Maya's, his face turned as white as a sheet. His hand shook so much that he dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor. The whole room went silent as Maya walked right up to him, her heels clicking like a heartbeat. She stood so close she could smell his expensive cologne. She leaned in and whispered, "I told you I would come back for what you took from me. The law didn't care about my mother, but the dragon does." She turned to the crowd with a sharp, cold smile, leaving Alistair looking like a ghost. For the first time, the billionaire was the one who looked small and afraid. Life at the giant estate became a strange and lonely routine. Every day, Cassian worked like a machine to destroy Alistair's world. He used his power to cut off the ships that brought Alistair's goods and blocked every one of his bank accounts. He was slowly choking the life out of Atlas Global. But as the days passed, Maya noticed something scary. Cassian didn't just want to help her. He wanted to own her completely. He knew exactly what she ate for breakfast, every person she spoke to, and even what she dreamed about. One night, she woke up and saw a dark shape by the window. It was Cassian standing in the shadows just watching her sleep. "I am keeping you safe," he whispered when she sat up, his voice low and raspy. He stayed there for a long time, his gaze never leaving her. Maya realized that his protection was turning into a dark, terrifying obsession. He treated her like a treasure he had stolen and never wanted to let go. She was finally safe from Alistair Kang, but she was now trapped in the deep, dark shadow of the man who saved her. "A queen must know how to fight her own battles," Cassian said the next day. He led Maya to a large training room with black mats on the floor and weapons on the walls. He didn't hire a teacher for her. He decided to train her himself. He pushed her for hours, making her move faster and strike harder until her muscles screamed in pain. At one point, Maya tried to swing at him, but he was too fast. He caught her and pinned her against the wall, his large hands holding her wrists tight above her head. Their faces were only inches apart. The air in the room felt thick and hot, and Maya could feel his heartbeat against her own. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. It wasn't just fear. It was a strange spark of heat she couldn't explain. "Never let them see you blink. Never let them see your weakness," he growled, his eyes searching hers. In that moment, Maya realized she was changing. She was leaning into the darkness. She was learning to be just as cold and dangerous as the man holding her. The first real blow hit Alistair on a quiet Tuesday morning. Cassian's team of hackers sent a secret file to every news station in the city. It was a list of names and dates that proved Alistair had cheated on insurance claims for years. He had let people die just to make himself a little more money. By noon, the news was everywhere. Atlas Global's stock price fell like a rock, losing millions of dollars in minutes. People were screaming and throwing things outside his office doors. Maya watched the chaos on a giant screen in the penthouse, sipping tea. She saw Alistair running from reporters, his expensive suit messy and his hair wild with fear. He finally knew the truth. He wasn't fighting a helpless girl anymore. He was fighting a ghost who had the entire power of the Mafia behind her. The revenge she had bought for $10,000 was finally starting to work. Alistair Kang was losing his empire, and Maya was just getting started. The power felt like a heavy crown, but Maya began to enjoy the weight. She found out about a family living in a small apartment. Like her mother, they had been cheated by Alistair Kang's company. Their son was sick and they had no money left. Maya didn't ask Cassian for help. She commanded it. She used his name to force a top doctor to go to their home. She used the syndicate's money to pay their bills in full. When she saw the mother cry with relief, Maya realized she wasn't just a victim anymore. She was using the Mafia's dark power to bring light to people who had been ignored. She was learning that justice didn't always come from a courtroom. Sometimes it came from the shadow of a dragon. The estate was quiet that night. Maya found Cassian sitting on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. For the first time, he didn't look like a boss. He looked lonely. Maya sat beside him, and the silence felt different. "Why do they call you the Cold?" she asked softly. Cassian looked at his hands, which were scarred from many battles. He told her about growing up in a world where showing feelings meant you were weak. He had to freeze his heart to survive. As he spoke, Maya saw the man behind the monster. He wasn't just a machine. He was someone who had been hurt by the world too. When his hand brushed against hers, a spark of heat flared between them. It was a feeling she wasn't supposed to have, but she couldn't look away. Alistair Kang was drowning, and he knew it. His money was gone, his friends had left him, and the police were knocking on his door. He was desperate. In a dark room, Alistair met with a group of dangerous men from a rival gang. He offered them his last hidden millions to do one job: kidnap Maya's soul. "She is the only thing Cassian cares about," Alistair hissed, his eyes bloodshot and crazy. "Take her, and you take his soul." He thought that if he could hurt Maya, he could stop the dragon from destroying him. He didn't know that attacking Maya would only make Cassian's fire burn hotter. While Maya planned her next move of justice, the shadows around her began to move. The counterstrike had begun. The cemetery was quiet, the air smelling of damp earth and fading flowers. Maya stood before her mother's headstone, the black diamond on her finger catching the dim afternoon light. For a moment, she wasn't the dragon bride or a woman of the Mafia. She was just a daughter who missed her mother. She placed a bouquet of fresh lilies on the grass, the same flowers Alistair Kang had refused to pay for. "I'm doing it, Mom," she whispered. "He's losing everything." But the silence was broken by the crunch of gravel. Maya's training kicked in before she even saw them. 3 men in leather jackets stepped from behind the large stone monuments. They didn't look like Cassian's polished guards. They looked like street dogs, hungry and mean. One of them held a thick roll of tape, and another reached for a heavy taser. "Alistair sends his regards," the leader hissed, stepping onto the grass. "He says if he's going down, he's taking the only thing the dragon loves with him." Maya didn't scream. She remembered Cassian's voice in the training room. "Never let them see you blink." As the first man lunged, she dropped low, swept his leg with a kick she had practiced 100 times, and felt the satisfying thud as he hit the ground. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a weapon. The fight didn't last long. Maya was fast, but there were 3 of them. Just as the leader grabbed her arm, a black SUV roared through the cemetery gates, tearing up the grass. The door flew open before the car even stopped. Cassian stepped out, and the air seemed to freeze. He didn't have a gun in his hand. He didn't need one. His eyes were no longer obsidian, they were red with a terrifying ancient rage. The cold had finally melted, revealing a volcano underneath. "You touched her," Cassian said, his voice a low growl that vibrated in Maya's chest. In a flash of movement, he was upon them. It wasn't a fight. It was a massacre. He moved with a brutal speed that Maya had never seen in the training room. Within seconds, the 3 men were broken on the ground, begging for mercy they hadn't planned to show her. Cassian ignored them, walking straight to Maya. He grabbed her face in his hands, his fingers trembling. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. When he saw a small scratch on her wrist, he let out a sound of pure pain. He pulled her against his chest, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. In that moment, Maya realized Alistair was right about one thing. She wasn't just a contract to Cassian. She was his entire world. Back at the penthouse, the atmosphere was thick with secrets. Cassian had gone to deal with the men, leaving Maya alone, driven by a strange feeling. She wandered into the back hallway of his private office, a place she was strictly forbidden to go. She found a small hidden door behind a bookshelf. Inside was a room that made her blood run cold. It wasn't filled with weapons or money. It was filled with her. There were photos of her at the hospital from a year ago. There were copies of her mother's medical records from before the insurance claim was even denied. There was a log of every place she had worked and every bus she had taken for the last 3 years. Maya gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Cassian hadn't met her by chance on that rainy night. He hadn't offered the 90-day contract because he was bored or needed a distraction. He had been tracking her, guarding her, and waiting for the moment she was desperate enough to walk into his arms. "You found it," a voice said from the doorway. Maya spun around. Cassian stood there, his suit still stained with the blood of the men from the cemetery. He didn't look ashamed. He looked like a man who had finally trapped the star he had been chasing for a lifetime. "You've been watching me for years," Maya whispered, her heart racing. "The contract. Was it all a lie?" "The revenge is real, Maya," Cassian said, stepping into the room. "But the marriage. I was never going to let you go after 90 days. The glass doors of Atlas Global didn't just open. They shattered the silence of the 55th floor. Maya Soul walked in first, her black silk dress snapping behind her like a dark flag. She looked like a storm. Beside her, Cassian walked with dangerous grace, his hand resting firmly on her back at the end of the long table. Alistair Kang was trying to convince his directors that the company was safe. When he saw Maya, his mouth hung open and his remote clattered to the floor. The other directors whispered in fear. They knew Cassian. Oh, they knew if the ghost of Soul was here, someone was about to lose everything. "This meeting is over," Cassian said, his voice cutting like a knife. He tossed a stack of blue folders onto the table. They slid across the wood, stopping in front of the board members. "While you were hiding from reporters, I was buying your life. As of 9 o'clock, the syndicate owns 51% of Atlas Global." The room went deathly quiet. The directors turned pale as they read the papers. Alistair reached for the files, his hand shaking so much he could barely grip them. Maya stepped forward and placed a single piece of paper on the table. The hospital bill with the red denied stamp. She looked Alistair directly in his bloodshot eyes. "You told me my mother was an inefficiency," Maya said, her voice low and steady. "You said her life wasn't worth the cost. Well, Alistair, I did the math. It turns out you are the one who is inefficient now." She looked at the terrified board members. "As the new owner, I have one order. Alistair Kang is stripped of his title and his shares. He is to be kicked out of this building immediately. Since he likes saving money, he can walk home. He no longer owns a car. You can't do this." Alistair screamed, lunging toward her. Before he could get close, Cassian's hand was around his throat, pinning him into his chair. Cassian leaned down, his eyes glowing with rage. "If you ever move toward my wife again, I won't just take your company. I'll take your breath." Alistair nodded frantically, tears of terror streaming down his face. 2 guards grabbed him by the arms and dragged him out. He looked broken, a shell of the man who had played God with people's lives. Maya watched him go. Feeling the weight finally lift from her shoulders, she took the seat at the head of the table. "Now," she said, her black diamond ring glinting in the light, "let's talk about the new rules for this company." The victory in the boardroom was short-lived. As Maya and Cassian stepped out of the Atlas Global Tower, the air was filled with the wail of sirens. Dozens of police cars screeched to a halt, blocking their path. Alistair Kang stood near the lead car, his face twisted in a desperate, ugly grin. He was disheveled and broken, but he held a thick folder of his own. "You thought you won, Maya?" Alistair screamed over the sirens. "If I'm going down, I'm taking your husband with me. He tossed the folder to a lead detective. There it is. Every illegal deal, every shipment, and every body the O Syndicate has buried for 10 years. Arrest him. The detectives looked at the papers and then at Cassian. The ghost of soul didn't flinch. He didn't reach for a weapon. He stood tall, his hands still protective over Maya's. He knew. Alistair had spent his final hours digging up the Syndicate's darkest secrets. The trap was set. For the first time, Maya felt the cold sting of fear. She had her revenge, but she was about to lose the man who gave it to her. I can handle this, Maya, Cassian whispered, his voice as calm as a frozen lake. The police moved in, their handcuffs glinting in the streetlights. Cassian looked at the lead detective, a man who had been trying to catch him for years. I will go quietly, but the lady stays out of this. She is a civilian. Alistair laughed, a high, crazy sound. She's a Mafia bride. She's as guilty as he is. Cassian stepped forward, his eyes burning with a silent warning that made even the armed officers hesitate. My lawyers will be at the station before the ink on the report is dry. But if you touch her, I will burn this city to the ground before I reach my cell. He turned to Maya one last time. He reached out and brushed a stray hair from her face. Go to the estate. Stay behind the gates. I promised you 90 days of protection, and I intend to keep it. As the police led him away in chains, Maya watched the only person who truly saw her disappear into the back of a van. She stood alone in the middle of the street, the black diamond ring on her finger feeling like a lead weight. 3 days later, Maya walked through the cold gray halls of the high-security prison. She wasn't there to see Cassian. She was there to see the man in cell 402. Alistair Kang sat on a thin cot, his expensive suit replaced by a rough orange jumpsuit. He looked small. He looked old. When he saw Maya, he lunged at the bars, his fingers clawing at the air. You ruined me. I'll tell them everything about you. Maya didn't flinch. She stood in front of the bars, her face as calm as the marble in Cassian's penthouse. She reached into her bag and pulled out a single crumpled envelope. It was the same one from the rainy night, the one that held her last $10,000. She slid it through the slot in the bars. What is this? Alistair hissed, staring at the money. That is the $10,000 you saved by letting my mother die, Maya said, her voice like cracking ice. Consider it your pay for the rest of your life, because that money is the only thing you have left. I bought your downfall with that cash, Alistair, and now I'm buying your soul. As she walked away, Alistair began to scream, the sound echoing off the stone walls. Maya didn't look back. She had one more person to save. The 90 days had finally come to an end. The O estate was silent, the morning sun casting long golden shadows across the marble floors. Maya stood in the center of the grand foyer, her single suitcase sitting by her feet. In her hand she held a thick envelope containing $50 million and the deed to her mother's childhood home. She had won. Alistair Kang was in prison, his company was gone, and her mother's name was cleared. Cassian stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, his back to her. He had been released from custody just hours before, lawyers dismantling Alistair's desperate lies with surgical precision. He looked powerful, yet strangely still. He didn't turn around as she picked up her bag. The car is waiting, Maya, he said, his voice a low, rough whisper. The contract is finished. You are a free woman. You never have to see this world again. Maya looked at the door, then at the man who had become her shield, her teacher, and her darkest obsession. She remembered the hidden room and the photos he had kept of her. She knew now that he had loved her long before she ever knew his name. She was free to go, but the world outside felt cold and empty without the dragon. Maya didn't walk toward the door. Instead, she walked toward Cassian. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the 90-day contract. The paper wrinkled from the months she had spent gripping it in fear and hope. With a slow, steady motion, she tore the paper in half, then again until the pieces fell to the floor like snow. I don't want the money, Cassian, she said, her voice clear and strong. And I don't want the house. Cassian turned, his eyes wide with a shock she had never seen before. Maya, what are you doing? This was the deal. The deal is over, Maya said, stepping into his space until she could feel the heat radiating from his chest. She held up her hand where the black diamond ring still glinted with a fierce light. I'm not a contract bride anymore, and I'm not your prize. She reached up, her fingers grazing his jaw. If I stay, it's because the dragon finally found a queen who isn't afraid of his fire. Cassian's cold exterior finally shattered. He let out a ragged breath and pulled her into his arms, his grip possessive and desperate. He didn't need a contract to keep her anymore. The 90 days were over, but their story was just beginning. The dragon had his queen, and the city would never be the same. Alistair Kang thought he could put a price on a human life. He thought $10,000 was small change. But that small change bought him a front row seat to his own destruction.
The city is quiet tonight, Maya. They're all waiting to see what the queen does next.
I didn't just survive the 90 days. I conquered them. I walked into this house with a damp envelope and a broken heart. I'm walking out of the shadows with the man who would burn the world just to keep me warm. Revenge is a dish best served cold. But it's much better when you have a king to share it with. And that is how the Dragon Bride took over the underworld. Maya went from having nothing to having everything. But the real question is, who's next? Like if Alistair got what he deserved. Share this video to help us grow the Dragon's Army. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter. You guys were amazing during this series. Stick around because our next story is even crazier. See you in the next one.